What's up, world? First and foremost, I just want to say thank you for checking out my channel to provide you with the content that you were looking for. You could have chose anyone else, but you're giving me the opportunity to give you this content, and so I appreciate you for that. I was one of the very few lucky ones to get into Diablo Immortal Alpha, and really, honestly, I had a blast playing it, man. And so I waited a little while before I decided to do a review on this because, I want to make sure I finished all of Alpha for the 2.5 weeks that I played, because, you get into like a new thing or a new game and things like that, and you get into the honeymoon stage. It's like, hey, this is great. This is fun. But what does it feel like after you put in 100 to 150 hours into it? Does it still feel the same way? Are you still excited as much as you were before? So I felt like it was only, a true review if I did it after, the alpha was over. So I'm going to be coming from the perspective of someone who doesn't play mobile games usually. And I'm going to also be coming from the perspective of someone who's played Diablo 3 and still plays Diablo 3 to this day for the past 8 years. So if any of those sides kind of pertain to you, then I think you're going to get a lot out of this review. So let's dive in. Plainly put, the game is simply gorgeous, from the crisp textures to the visually stunning glow that accompanies each one of the class's skills and attacks. It all blends well on top of a silky smooth frame rate if your phone is capable of handling the higher settings. While you can definitely see that they took some inspiration from Diablo 3, reusing similar tile sets for the level structures and the like, it doesn't feel nearly as cartoony as its older brother, despite the damage numbers looking like a product from the Acme Corporation from the Looney Tunes, Roadrunner, and Wile E. Coyote series. I did run into some texture pop-ins and the like, but considering that this is alpha testing, it was to be expected. Oftentimes, I forgot about it as I was enjoying the incredibly detailed characters, models, and the gear alike. How they made this game look more aesthetically pleasing than Diablo 3, on the phone nonetheless, is beyond me. Great job to the art team. So I spent most of my playtime, streaming the game with my own background music. But when I wasn't, I did enjoy the game's music overall. The orchestration available for each town and zone works well to provide the right mood and ambiance you would expect. One of my favorites is the music during the challenge riffs, which are a lot like Diablo 3's greater riffs. More on that later. The music definitely sets the mood for the competitive side of the game, something that was sorely missing in Diablo 3 with greater riffs not only being farmable but also attached to the leaderboard. The sound effect palettes used and or created are all of high quality and distinct from each other, and closely match what you will see visually on the screen to provide the appropriate feel for each action taken. This is much like D3 in this sense, and while most people would be surprised to hear me say that, the music and audio in D3 is fairly good. It's just unfortunate that the sound quality settings in Diablo 3 somehow had an adverse effect on the gameplay, and therefore many players opt to use the low settings and remove background music altogether. I did not run into this problem in Diablo Immortal, so rejoice. Alright, cut. Let's hold up for a second. You all remember this guy from BlizzCon, right? How could we forget this infamous moment? But what if I told you that this same guy played a huge role in the gameplay and combat in Diablo 3? Bruh. Yes, that's right. This is the very same guy who gave us uncompromising, addictive gameplay in Diablo 3 and is the lead in Diablo Immortal. And guess what? His legacy continues in Diablo Immortal with ultra smooth combat, animation canceling, attack indicators on the biggest of bad guys. It is everything you would want in an action RPG. The phone controls are surprisingly responsive with a good feel and a great sense of thumb placement. Since I usually don't play mobile games, it took me a good 20 minutes or so to get used to the button layout. But after that small period, picking up the phone and diving right into combat became second nature. Having your thumbs on the screen isn't as annoying as you'd think it would be, and it doesn't really get in the way of the presentation at large. There are a few hiccups here and there, and oftentimes I have to remember that this is just an alpha because it honestly feels and plays like an open beta. But oftentimes I've overlooked these inconveniences because the gameplay loop is so good. It's really one of those things that you just have to get your hands on to understand, but they nailed it here. However, I am hoping that they do consider adding controller support down the road. Despite how solid the phone controllers are, there's just a level of accuracy and comfort that simply cannot match up to playing on the controller. This is a request in extremely high demand, so please, Blizzard, pretty please give me app controller support. Please? So what's an action RPG without some good old loot and gear for you to grind for? So here in this section, I'm going to talk briefly about gear and how that works here. So we have two different sections of gear. You have your main gear slots, and then you have your secondary slots. Your main gear slots will consist of what you see on the right side here with the helmet, chest, shoulders, pants, and your weapons. And then you have the secondary slot, which consists of your jewelry, your gloves, belts, and your boots. So once you're able to get to the rare quality or above, you can basically rank up that piece of gear to make that gear stronger via higher attribute stats, okay? And then in your main gear, you can have up to legendary quality for that particular pieces of gear, and they can rank up considerably higher than their rare counterparts. So the higher your gear rank is, the more of the attributes you can get, and also more of bonus attributes you can get to as well. So in order to be able to rank up your gear, you need to be able to farm the required mats to be able to do so, and in turn, it does require quite a bit of time to really reach that threshold. So the one really cool thing I will say about the gearing system in this game is that if you find a new piece of gear, no worries, because if you find a new piece and it's an upgrade, you can easily just transfer all of your old ranks into your new piece of gear, so you're not having to refarm all those mats to rank up those pieces of gear again. All gear comes with sockets in which you can further customize your character. These sockets are specific, with legendary gear able to roll legendary sockets, while rare gear can roll specific sockets that are sort of color coordinated, which can only take certain gems related to that socket color. Each of these gems can be leveled up by looting multiples of the same for legendary gems and upgrading regular gems very similar to the jeweler in Diablo 3. The higher the level of the gem, the more that is required to rank up the gems, much like ranking up the gear itself. Gear and gems in tandem work well together for a fair sense of progress and a compelling reason to grind for hours, as many of us did in the alpha. A solid design system. On the surface, the presentation of skills seemed rather bland. Heavily influenced by Diablo 3, we are presented with only a fraction of the available selections that we've grown accustomed to. These skills come as they are, with no runes, elements, or variations to directly choose from. However, the way each skill functions is tied to legendary gear. Again, this does feel rather shallow. But given the amount of legendary affixes available that are directly tied to the skills you use, and you quickly realize that there is, in fact, some depth to this system. For example, a legendary shoulder slot from the Demon Hunter can roll multiple different Rain of Vengeance effects, from stunning mobs to dropping bombs to adding a chill effect, etc. In my playtime, I found 3 different Sentry legendary gear, all rolled in different gear slots. It feels like they got rid of all the unnecessary fluff and focused more on the possible effects for each skill, which felt like a good change during my playthrough. One of my favorite and surprising effects was the legendary pants that I found that completely changed the way Smokescreen functions. Here you can see Smokescreen in its normal glory. The visuals are quite nice. Now, here's Smokescreen with the legendary effect after I switch pants. Instead of it being the Smokescreen to get away scot-free, it is now a gas bomb that does damage over time instead. Pretty neat. The marketplace and Blizzard's monetization model are two separate things. Since we were not able to test the monetization model and the amount of nuances is better explained in a separate video which I may do later, I'll talk about the marketplace. The marketplace is sort of like an auction house, but not the god-awful version we had in Diablo 3, but more like what is seen in World of Warcraft. Using the in-game currency, you can buy, swap, trade for most things in the game except for legendary gear. There's even a nifty search bar in which we can look for very specific things, though it is only the aesthetic of the marketplace that was available and we weren't actually able to do any trading in alpha. Still, it looks promising as an additional way to use what we found in game to get other things we might want. So rifts are back, but with a new flair. Elder Rifts, much like Nephilim Rifts in Diablo 3, are randomly generated maps in which you kill things to fill a progress bar, which when filled will spawn a Rift Guardian at the end. You then kill the Rift Guardian for the loots. Unlike Nephilim Rifts, there are no keys to obtain to do other content. Instead, Elder Rifts in Alpha stage are primarily where you find legendary gems and runes needed to also craft legendary gems. You can opt to plug in crests to receive more runes at the end, or legendary crests to guaranteed a legendary gem drop at the end. When you do this, modifiers are added to the Rift, which can either benefit you or harm you in some way, much like Wilson and Path of Exile system. The modifiers didn't really seem all that interesting, and I mostly ignored them while plowing through to the Rift Guardian, but the idea is there and I'm curious to see how they will flesh it out. Challenge Rifts, on the other hand, is where the competitive aspect of Diablo Immortal kicks in. While the basis is similar to Greater Rifts in Diablo 3, with randomized maps, pylons, enemies, and a progression bar to fill to spawn a Rift Guardian, you don't get any loot or XP for doing a Challenge Rift at all. The system is only here for leaderboard progress only, so this isn't something you do for farming. You do, however, get rewarded for doing a Challenge Rift level for the very first time. Every week, there is a Challenge Rift event in which if you place in the top X, or for Alpha, it was top 10, in your class, you get handsomely rewarded. The higher you place, the more of these rewards you will get. This is a good system that gives you incentive to compete on a more regular basis and a sense of progression week to week as your character grows in strength. The fact that they separated this from the content grind is a smart idea and ultimately keeps the content grind fresh. What I did not like about Challenge Rifts though are the small selection of randomized maps, oftentimes resembling Halls of Agonies and Caves layout from Diablo 3. All maps felt congested and narrow, and oftentimes the ground terrain would make it impossible to move it around for better positioning, causing much frustration for me and my friends that were pushing the leaderboards diligently. While I'm contributing much of my dislike to the fact that this is still alpha and most likely not fleshed out yet, I have to critique it as it is and hope to see more polish in this area down the line. Blizzard calls this mid-game content, but for the sake of simplicity and what was available for alpha, I'm just going to call it endgame. We have bounties, which are a bit more fun to do than their Diablo 3 counterparts, in which you select from a bounty board. You can select 4 at a time for a total of 12 bounties per day. Much like buying materials with in-game currency from vendors, bounties have a daily cap and is the only in-game content that does. Initially, this sounds like a bad thing, but given how rewarding bounties are, I can see why there's a daily limit. I spent much of my time roaming and exploring the world maps, as this was the best way to farm materials, find hidden layers for better chances at loot and regular gems, doing random quests and events that pop up, and farming monster essence, which randomly drops throughout the world from enemies. After collecting enough monster essence, you can then go to the Heroic Altar, which is essentially a giant collection of mob information you can unlock in exchange for loot, XP, and gold. In addition to roaming the world, there are dungeons in which you can do. You essentially fight your way through a predetermined layout, often backed by story, but with randomized, normal, and elite mobs. The bosses here all remain the same. There's a world event on each map that you can partake in, either solo, in a party, or with other players that are also roaming around with you. My favorite was the haunted carriage in the cemetery, which would appear once every 30 minutes, and my friends and I would frantically chase this thing down, killing all minions until he decided to man up and show himself at the end of his journey, and we obliterated him on the spot. For those that like PvP, there's a world event that is literally PvP. You basically show up to an area, agree to alliances beforehand, or solo if you prefer, and you fight to the death for a chest of loot at the end. Dungeons in Alpha was the best way to earn experience points, but mobs and dungeons did not drop monster essence, nor were there randomized events inside, so it meant that if you were doing dungeons, you were doing them for a specific purpose. Dungeons are also great for targeted loot in a sense. Every day, each of the 6 dungeons will randomly have a greater emphasis on a gear slot item. On Monday, it might show 3 of the 6 dungeons with the emphasis on chest gear, while on Thursday, a totally different set of dungeons may have an emphasis on shoulder gear. Regardless of which content I decide to embark on, I was always earning achievements, whether that was killing a specific legendary monster or finding a hidden scroll. I was always rewarded for doing so. There's so much to do and things to explore that it surprisingly puts Diablo 3 to shame in terms of content, and it's only alpha. After over 150 plus hours of content grinding, I never really got tired of it and was always looking forward to doing something to push my character to its limits. Solid design by Blizzard so far. Yes, Paragon makes a return in Diablo Immortal. Once you hit max level, you can continue to earn XP and Paragon points, in which you can use to customize your character even further. There are a total of 4 Paragon trees in Alpha that you can invest your points in, depending on your style of play. 2 of the 4 Paragon trees are locked until you earn enough Paragon points to open. These Paragon trees work a lot like skill trees in a sense where you put points in certain areas to unlock bonuses in another, and some often play off each other. Given the fact that each node does have a cap, and thus the trees themselves have a cap, there is technically a soft cap to the amount of Paragon points you can spend unless Blizzard decides to add more trees in the future. In the alpha, none of us reached that point, and most weren't even close to capping out a single tree. So it's safe to say that there's hours and hours of grind to be had here. To wrap up the video, I'm gonna say this game is a AAA title on your phone. This is a true Diablo experience on your phone. And I know there are people who are still skeptical about the game because it is in fact on a mobile device. And then of course the debacle that happened on, at BlizzCon 2018, and let's be real, Blizzard did kind of deserve that based on how they introduced the game to a PC audience. I mean, let's be real with that. But overall thoughts, man, you have to play it whenever you get the chance, the opportunity. If you can get into beta or when the game comes out, I just urge you to give it a shot, to give it a chance. They spent a good 2 years kind of being quiet about it and turned this into a really good product that you really don't want to miss, even if you are a PC gamer yourself. I'm looking forward to hopefully being able to get into the beta so I can stream it and make some more video content like this. But in the meantime, kind of having some withdrawals because, man, honestly, game was fun. But appreciate you guys stopping by my channel. This is Dioxide. You guys have a good one.